Hey guys, how are we? Well, here in, I think it's Wongamat, just behind me here is the Temple of Truth, I think it is. And originally I think that was commissioned in the early 80s, if I'm not mistaken. And it was funded by a Thai multi-millionaire. And he's apparently died by now and not actually seen it completed. And but apparently it was started to try and encourage the construction of Thai buildings, you know, not using nails and you know, traditional building techniques for the Thais, and try and keep that alive. And I think it try and incorporates wood engravings from 4 different cultures. I think Chinese, Thai, I think Hindu, or Buddhist. Anyway, you get the gist of it. So, and Indian, I think. But anyway, so that's basically the idea of the concept behind it. So that is the Temple of Truth. So a lot of intricate carvings there, and apparently it'll never be finished because it's constantly needing to be redone because it's basically just pure wood carvings, and I don't think it's protected from the elements. But anyway, so interesting times here in Thailand. So did see yesterday that the Chinese have got bank runs at the moment. This is not all that surprising, to be honest, when you understand how the Chinese system works. And I think I've covered that in previous videos. And in the second last video I did, I talked about fiscal sterilization, and the Chinese have been involved in that for decades, which basically is just a way to try and reduce the value of their currency so that it's more competitive in regards to trade. So the Chinese have got real issues on their hands. I think their official GDP to debt ratio is around 380%, and don't quote me on that, but it's extremely high. In contrast to classical economics, which is about 80% of GDP deficit or greater is considered a failed state. And I think the US is about 150 or 180%. I haven't looked at it for a while, but it's well over 80. So that's the world that we live in at the moment in regards to economics. The classic sort of conservative economics is out the window. But China, as I said, 380% plus GDP deficit. They're in real trouble, and that is shown by the bank runs that they've got in China at the moment. They've got riots, they've got security guards and police being particularly brutal with you know, depositors who are demanding their money back, and you know, people that have, you know, saved a lot of money. I mean, a typical Chinese person saves on average 20% of their income, whereas Westerners typically save around 4%. So you can imagine if you've worked the last 20 or 30 years and then the banks decided that, hey, we're not going to give you any deposits back, you'd be really upset. So a lot of these Chinese people are absolutely beside themselves. Now, the problem for China is that it is a centrally managed economy. And there's only one place where the buck is going to stop, and that's with the CCP. So in response to the situation with the banks in China being illiquid, what they've done is they've actually issued treasury bonds, local treasury bonds in China, to try and bring liquidity back into the banks. Now, this is similar in one aspect to what happened in 2008 with the GFC. Typical and similar in some aspects, but different. So the real problem is liquidity. if banks do not have interbank lending, then you have liquidity problems, and that liquidity is actually the oil that makes the global economy run. And you know what happens to an engine that has no engine oil? It seizes, and that's what the GFC was about. So what is this an indication of? Well, it's an indicator that the Chinese economy is in really bad shape. It's buggered, as an Australian would say. So it's in real dire problems. And this, I suspect, is just the beginning. You can't just continue to print money hand over fist. You know, we saw what happened in the French Revolution to monarchs who decided that they were going to just do, money printing ad infinitum. And, you know, they certainly had the high, heady times before they had the French Revolution, but certainly ended not so well. And I think, you know, so the French aristocracy soon found out that the common folk certainly call the shots at the end of the day. So that's what's happening in China at the moment. Now, to give you a bit of a backstory in regards to China, China is made up of 57 different people groups. Most speak their own dialect and certainly want a say in governance. So what's happened is in 1978, I think it was Deng Xiaoping opened up 16 free trade zones in the east, and that brought incredible affluence for some Chinese and still subsistence living in the west for others. And that's what's been going on for the last 30, 40 years. And they talk about these last 30 years as a great leap forward. But the great leap forward has sort of come about through various dubious methods. Some of those being the theft of IP, the registration of spurious trademarks, and IP things like left-handed screwdrivers and checkered paint, and that's literally some of the IP that they've registered. Now, to give you an understanding as to why they would do that, registering patents is a key indicator for someone in finance as to where the opportunities for economic and financial growth lie. And so they look at those sorts of things and they say, okay, there's a huge amount of patents, so there's a lot of research and development happening there. Let's find as many opportunities in those markets as possible to invest. And that's basically what's happened over the last 20, 30 years. But as I said, a lot of those patents, when the financiers actually went in and investigated it, realized that a lot of these patents are just crap. And and then you have the real tragedy where, foreign companies like Caterpillar had to go into China, relinquish a lot of their intellectual property, and just so they could start a company and have local partners, and ended up losing a lot more in regards to their technological advancements and their advantages over the Chinese and other markets. They lost it all in no time at all. So a lot of stupid little things that have happened in regards to China, a lot of mistakes made by Western companies. So where does that leave us now? Well, the curious thing is, since around 2016, the Chinese have made it very, very difficult for Westerners to live in China. And they talk about Westerners leaving China as the Great Escape. And that is basically Westerners who have seen the writing on the wall and thought, we need to get out of here as soon as possible. And rightly so, because the Chinese have made life extremely difficult for Westerners and foreigners as a whole to live in China. They've been denied access to certain events and certain activities and certain places, and denied freedom of movement in some aspects of China. You know, for example, black people have been forcibly removed from hotels and kicked out of the country. And in response to this, the Chinese people that live inside China have said, well, where are all the foreigners gone? And so the official response apparently has been that, well, you know, European people and African people couldn't handle the fast pace of a successful Chinese economy, and so they've moved back to the slower pace of their own homelands. And, you know, what was it? This one is funny. African people are used to walking down the street and, you know, walking through the forest and easily picking fruit off a tree to eat and drinking straight out of the rivers. So this is the sort of racist crap that they go on with. So yeah, very, very interesting times. It's not going to end well. This is exactly what I talked about in a presentation I did in 2013, actually, for some heads of state and government reps. I did talk about a lot of this sort of stuff. And really it's a fight for the Chinese. Who's going to implode first? Is it going to be the Chinese or the Americans? And I think the Chinese are just hoping that the Americans implode first so that they can sort of scoop up all of the benefits of being the last remaining global superpower. But I'm not sure how that's all going to work out, to be honest. I think we're getting to a very critical point. As I said, it's not good when your banks have got a bank run and you know, the common folk who've been saving all their life cannot you know, withdraw any of their savings. And you know, these temporary measures of the CCP to issue local government treasury bonds is just a temporary stopgap. There are broader issues in the economy there, and it's not going to end well. Anyway guys, going to leave that there. Thanks for watching. If you haven't liked and subscribed to the channel, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. It helps me out. Hit the like button, helps the algorithm. So yeah, all right guys, going to leave that there and I'll chat with you soon.